Welcome to lesson number 1. We're going to start by creating a new project inside Revit. I'm using Revit 16 and I'll be using the architectural template that comes with the software. Click Projects, Architectural Template. The architectural template consists of a number of settings and objects that we can use to start creating a building, an architectural building, from the first moment. So we'll be designing a building that I worked at Dark Architects, my current employer, and we're going to start by using the Revit origin as a basis for a grid. So the origin, when you're in level 1 in the project browser, I'll come back to explaining what's with the menus on top, the property palette, and the project browser as we go. But first off, we go into this view and display hidden elements. Click this button to see the origins inside a Revit view. Then we go to the architectural tab and create grids. Click the grid button or use the shortcuts GR, which you can see in the parentheses behind the command name. Start a grid. We're gonna snap to the origin and then drag a line and click close to the north elevation symbol. That creates my first grid, and it's going to be called grid number 1. So I close that command by either clicking Modify, right-click Cancel, or Escape on the keyboard. Now next up, we turn off the Reveal Hidden Elements toggle mode to just show the regular Revit drawing space. Click on the grid, and when you do, you can see that you have a couple of grip points that you can use to changing the size of the grid line. Drag it down to the south elevation view marker. Now we select the grid. You can either select elements inside Revit by clicking on them or using a selection window, either a crossing window from right to left or normal box selection window from left to right. If you're familiar with AutoCAD or other software, it's kind of similar. So select grid number 1, and then we're going to array this grid. Click Array. You can see that when you are designing in Revit, you have the architectural menu open, but the moment you select an element inside Revit, Revit menu jumps to the Modify menu, where you can move and copy, rotate stuff. There's a command called Array. It has a shortcut AR. Press Array button and disable the Group and Associate option. Then we set 17 for number. That will create 16 new grids in addition to the one that we modeled. Choose second, move to second, and then we click anywhere and set the direction and distance for the array by moving our mouse horizontally towards the right. So now when Revit asks for numerical input, like a length between grid number 1 and 2, you can either snap to a certain distance or you can start punching values on your keyboard. So we're going to go 2400 on the keyboard, pressing Enter, and voila, we have 17 grids. Now let's select all these 17 grids by using the crossing selection command, and we're going to use a move tool with the shortcut MV. I'll stop repeating the shortcuts now. You can see them when you hover over a Revit command. I'm going to move the middle grid, number 9, left to align with grid number 1. Revit will always snap orthogonally. That's like perfectly to the left or perfectly to the right. So we're only moving the grids now horizontally to the left. When I click, I have a symmetrical grid layout of grids, vertical grids. So let's do the same thing with the horizontal grids. I'm going to display, using the Reveal Hidden Elements, I'm going to display the origins of Revit again, but this time I'm not going to draw a grid. I'm going to draw a reference plane, which is sort of the same thing, although not a grid. But reference planes, in short, will act like grids, but they won't display on drawings. So I'm going to create now a horizontal reference plane. I'm going to use escape on my keyboard, and I'm going to remove the origins to be correct. And as with grids, I'm going to select the reference plane and drag it left so it lays out nice here. Now let's continue by adding the horizontal grids. I'm going to press the grid command, and instead of using draw mode, I'm going to go over and select the pick lines mode for creating elements. This in Revit, this is very efficient. So then I use a number. I'm going to use the half of 2,4. I'm going to use 1200 as a distance. And now when you zoom in, I zoom using the wheel on my mouse. When I zoom in, you can see that if I go on top of the reference plane or bottom of the reference plane, you get a preview of where this new grid is going to be placed. So I'll place it on top of the reference plane that I just made, like so. I'm going to click Modify or Escape. I'm going to use a shortcut on my keyboard. That's the CX. That will zoom extend your view. The new grid that I created is going to be number 18 because the 17 was the previous grid. So I'm going to zoom in on grid number 18, which is now horizontally lying 1.2 meters above the center reference plane. I'm going to click inside where it says 18 two times, and I'm going to change the name of the grid to capital A. So when I click somewhere else or enter or whatever, I have created a new grid. Fantastic. So I'm going to array this grid now in the same way that I did with the last. I'm going to use a number 10. So we're going to have 10 grids, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to click somewhere in white drawing space, and now you can see that when I've zoomed in, the values for snapping here will have changed. It will also snap to the reference planes and stuff. So now you can also just, try to find 2.4 meters or just write them down. Just make sure that you point in the right direction. That's pretty important for using the array command. Now, there are many nice things with Revit, and one of the things, so small things that makes you happy, is that it will now, the grids that you just created will just fill out the alphabet in a perfect way. So this is not going to come as a surprise. We're going to move these grids. I use the crossing selection window like so, but you'll notice that now I have created 10 grids in addition to the reference plane, the horizontal reference plane. So in order to deselect the reference plane from the selection, you can either press Shift on your keyboard, hold Shift on your keyboard. You will see that you get a minus sign next to your cursor. Or you can use, and then obviously click on the reference plane, or you can use the filter in the Modify tab that's available here. You can see that you have selected 10 grids and one reference plane. Let's deselect the reference plane, press OK, and now the reference plane has disappeared from our selection. We go Move, find grid number, I think we're going to find grid number E, and move it up to where A was. And there we have perfectly symmetrical rectangular grid of grid elements. We're going to create a couple of more reference planes before we finish this section. Let's create them. We go reference plane and also now use pick lines. We're going to add an offset of 600 millimeters, one reference plane above grid A and below grid J. And then we just, without closing the command, we go change the offset to 750 millimeters and create a vertical reference plane to the left of grid number 1 and to the right of grid number 17. The last thing we do in this chapter is we add dimension lines between all the grids. Dimensions are available when the Modify tab is open. We can go straight to dimensions, align dimensions. There's a flyout on this command, so you can choose to use linear dimensions, which is basically the same thing as line dimensions, or angular, radial, diameter dimensions, and so on. Let's just go dimensions. It has a really nice shortcut, DI. So you start the command, and then we go click on grid number 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. When you have clicked on all the grids that you want to dimension, you place the dimension segments by clicking in empty space, like so. We create another dimension giving us the distance between grid number 1 and 17, and you'll notice that when you move the cursor around now, the dimension will snap to like a pretty nice distance from the previous dimension. You can always zoom while you're doing this, so like so. And then we do the same thing to the right here between the letter grids. 2.4 meters, and then from the first to the last. Snap. Perfect. I'm going to show you a small but important thing with Revit is that you can use dimensions and temporary dimension and permanent. This is a permanent dimension. You can use temporary dimensions for moving stuff. And you normally do this in Revit by clicking on the element that you want to move. Say if we want to move grid number A now up to a distance of 3 meters from grid number B. You can click on grid number A. You can either just drag it like this with your mouse. You can nudge it with the keyboards, in this case using the up and down arrow on the keyboard, or of course you can click on anything basically that's blue in Revit. You see that 2280 here now is a blue. You can click on this and just punch new numbers. So 3 meters we go 3M, because Revit will know that this is meters, and press enter. The grid moves to a distance of 3 meters from grid number B. So let's repeat this process by moving it back to 2.4 meters. So this is basically one of the easiest and most effective way of moving stuff inside Revit. And that's our grid layout. Now use the ZX command again inside our view, and we have zoom extents, and we're done with this first part, which was creating grids. Next up, I think we'll be looking at levels and working more vertically in space. Thank you.